Today, we'll be discussing the dependency theory formulated by Raoul Prebisch. To start, dependency theorists wanted to explain why poor countries depend on rich countries. In doing so, they explored the reasons behind this and whether this dependence is caused by the poor countries or by the outsider interference in the poor countries. The dependency theory is the idea that resources flow from a periphery of poor and underdeveloped states to a core of wealthy states, enriching the latter at the expense of the former. This theory was formulated in 1960 to respond to a statistic by a researcher known as Raoul Prebisch. In his research, Prebisch noted that the wealth of the advanced nations came from the developing ones. The dependency theory holds that developing nations are entirely dependent on advanced nations and this limits them from being industrious. The dependence theories are explained in many forms, one of them being colonialism. The earliest example of dependency is colonization, when European nations made colonies through their superior military technology. They exported natural resources from other places to Europe. They then manufactured these materials and sold them back into colonies, creating an economic system of exploitation. The countries of the world can be divided into two major world regions, the core and the periphery. The core includes major world powers and the countries that contain much of the wealth of the planet. The periphery has those countries that are not reaping the benefits of global wealth and globalization. Many reasons exist as to why the global structure has formed, but generally speaking, there are many barriers, physical and political, that prevent the poorer citizens of the world from participating in global relations. A.G. Frank, one of the main theorists within dependency theory, argued that the developing nations have failed to develop not because of the internal barriers, but because the developed West has systematically underdeveloped them, keeping them in a state of dependency. According to him, the developed nations fear losing their dominance and prosperity to the development of poor countries. Samir Amin suggested that there was an international division between central and peripheral capitalist formations. According to him, evolution of capitalism can be understood as a single system consisting of developed countries at center and of underdeveloped countries at periphery. The theory studies the unequal relationship within the world system, which includes the exploitation of labor by the core countries and the development of powerful countries. Colonialism and imperialism held some countries back, and the countries which were strong or the ruler countries at that time are ahead. Undeveloped and underdeveloped countries depend on advanced nations. In poorer countries, raw materials are sold at lower prices and workers are forced to work for lower wages than in developed countries with higher living standards. Rich class cooperate with each other and make sure that they stay in power. Relation between dominant and dependent states is dynamic as they have unequal pattern of interaction. The proponents of the theory believe that national interests can be satisfied by addressing the needs of poor rather than focusing on the satisfaction of higher classes. Dependency theory is an idea that social scientists continue to debate. The strengths of dependency theory include: the first, it looks at both political and economic aspects of development. Secondly, it treats the world as one system and shows the importance of linkages between countries. Third, it helps us to understand some of the bad effects of colonialism. And the fourth, it makes it clearer that even when the colonies became independent, economic and political powers remained with the countries of the North. The principal criticism of dependency theories has been that the school does not provide any substantive empirical evidences to support its arguments. There are few examples that are provided, but many exceptions are there which do not fit in the core periphery theory. Some countries which have close links with the North have recently shown economic development, for example Taiwan, South Korea and Brazil. Some countries such as North Korea, Cuba, China and Tanzania have tried to break off links with the North, but they have not succeeded since they still depend on the North in one way or another. It is difficult for small countries to raise enough investment capital on their own to break off links with the North. To conclude, the theory traces the sources of wealth of the rich countries and helps in explaining why some countries are poor while others are rich. Underdevelopment of developing states is not inherited, it was imposed by the development of industrialized nations. Underdeveloped nations can move out from dependency by not relying on outside help, taking action on their own.